start here and we can get started. So it's 7 o'clock. That means we can get started with our Model Monday fun. We got some people joining us online. We got a couple people joining us here in person. Last week we started a brand new project, and that brand new project was, well, it's right here on our screen. This little servo right here was our project, our part from last week for this project. We are making a useless box. And what is a useless box? A useless box is a little box that has one purpose. Usually the purpose is to turn itself off. So I kind of drew ahead a little bit just so I'd know where we're going, and I'll pull up our useless box project so you see what we got in store for the next couple of classes here. So here we go. So this is our useless box right here, or this is where we're going with it at least. This week, I think we're going to work on making the actual box, and then maybe we'll drop the switch in if we got time. I'd like to talk about making drawings that you can take into the wood shop or into the metal shop, so you don't have to bring your laptop in with measurements. And then hopefully next week, we will get to joints. So joints are these things right here. So here we got this arm that comes out and we'll hit the switch. So that's kind of the purpose of a useless box, is to, like I said, turn itself off. So you'll hit the switch and this arm will pop out and toggle it back and then go away. So that's what we got in store for this week. Like I said, we're going to focus on this box right here, and let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to close this useless box file here, and I'm going to create a brand new document. So I can click on this new document tab here, new design tab up in my tabs of Fusion 360, and I got a new document to work on here. I'm going to start by making a sketch. So actually, you know what? Before I make a sketch, I'm going to start by making a new component. So we've got, normally when we draw things in this class, we just draw a single part, and each document is kind of its own component. But I'm going to make a new component here because we're going to make a couple other components inside of this document and kind of keep everything compartmentalized here. So I'm going to come up here to the Create menu, and I'm going to choose New Component. And I'm going to name this new component my box. So we're just making a standard component. It's an internal component, meaning the component is going to live inside of this document, as opposed to an external component where we kind of make a new document out of this component here. And the parent here is already says it's selected, and that's our main document component. So you can see over here in our browser on the left-hand side, there's this little radio button that's checked, and that means that this is our active component right now, and this component is going to live inside of this kind of document component. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And pipe up, of course, online or in person here if you have any questions. All right, so once I clicked OK, now you can see I've got a new component here inside of my unsaved component. And this new component, the radio button, became active here. This is really important to kind of keep an eye on as we draw components or make new components. And as we draw and extrude and all that kind of stuff, the place where we want to draw and extrude from, we have to kind of tell it what component we're drawing and extruding into by selecting these radio buttons. So I can change my active component just by clicking on the radio buttons next to it. And I can spin down that box component and see that it's pretty much empty. But right now, let's fill it with a sketch. So I'm going to come over here to the Create menu and choose Create Sketch. All right, so now I've got my 3 drawing planes that I can choose from here. I'm going to choose to draw on the top. So I'm going to kind of model this box kind of from the top down. So I'm going to come up here to my top and just kind of spin my view cube around so I make sure I hit the right surface. And I'm going to go ahead and click one time on that top surface, and now I've switched over to my drawing workspace or my sketching workspace. So you can see here I've got all my sketching tools at the top, and I can click on the Create menu and choose Rectangle, and I'm going to make a 2-point rectangle just because I think that'll be easy for us to do here. So I'll choose that 2-point rectangle option. I'll click on the origin there, and I'll move my rectangle outward. And I'm going to make this rectangle, let's say, 6 by 4. That seems like a good starting size for now. And I'm going to go ahead and click Enter. So this kind of represents the outer dimensions of our rectangle here. And we can now kind of imagine the side walls of our box here. So this is kind of the bottom of our box. And if we want to draw the side walls of our box, we can use the offset command. I think this is really handy for making a box here. So if I click on Modify and then come down to Offset, now I can specify the lines that I want to offset, or the sketch curves that I want to offset, and then I can move my little arrow, blue arrow here, in or out. This is where negative and positive numbers, you'll have to pay attention. So for me, if I do a positive 1/4 of an inch, my box offsets inwards. It could be that if you do a positive 1/4 of an inch, your box is offsetting outwards. Negatives and positives are always confusing to me in Fusion, so you just kind of have to keep an eye on it and see which direction your offset is moving. So again, I'm making my offset move inside of my box. And I'm going to say OK. So now I'll just take this little measurement and I'll move it off to the side so it's a little bit easier for me to read there. So it's not kind of trapped inside of my sketch, and I'll kind of clean up my other measurements here. Now we can draw a couple of lines. So this box is going to be made up of side walls that we make out of wood, or at least I'm imagining making them out of wood here. So if I come up to the Create menu and choose this line tool, I can draw lines from the intersection, from the corner point of this little offset rectangle outwards towards one side. So I'll do both of these, and then you can kind of see what the goal is here. So you can see we're kind of making each side wall of our box. I'll do that same thing to the other side. I'm just going to click and place a point, and then click and place another point here. And I'll do that. I'm kind of doing this deliberately, so I'm looking for my little blue square telling me that I'm snapping to this corner point. And then the other thing I'm looking for is that blue square again here telling me that this is my perpendicular constraint that's kind of being added to all these. I wish these constraints would stay the same size as I zoom in, but that right there is our constraint. And as I hover over it, you can kind of see what it's constraining. So it's constraining this line to be perpendicular to that line. My box here is all black lines. And that's a good thing. That means this box is fully constrained. So it's locked in position in space and in length. And what that means is I can change one of these measurements. I could change and make this like 5 inches. And it's just going to go ahead and redraw my box to be 5 by 6. And it's going to keep all these constraints, so all my walls are still going to work out there. So I'm going to go back to 4 by 6. It's just important to note that if you're going to want to change your measurements, you want to try to make your sketch as fully constrained as possible. All right, So now, I think this is the entirety of this sketch that we're going to make right now. I'm going to go ahead and click Finish Sketch, because we're all, is everybody with me? Are you guys following me at home? Hopefully the answer is yes. We got some nodding? All right, cool. We got some thumbs up. All right, great. So, and we're good here. So I'm going to go ahead and click Finish Sketch. And now we can name our sketch. So in my box component, I've got a Sketches folder. And in that Sketches folder, there's a sketch. And I'm going to call it just Box. That seems good enough for me. I'm going to kind of turn my view so it's a little bit more of a three-dimensional angle on my sketch here. And now I can start extruding some parts of this. So if I choose from my Create menu, if I choose Extrude, and I choose, I think I'm going to start by extruding the bottom of my sketch, or the bottom of my box, excuse me. So that means I'm going to select all 5 of these profiles, and then I'm going to move my arrow downwards away from myself. So the bottom of my box is going to go down for me in negative 0.25 inches here. Negative 1/4 inch, because that's how big I chose to make my walls here. So I'll make my box out of the same thickness material. It'll make it easier for us to plane and machine in the wood shop if we just got all the same thickness material here. So negative 1/4 inch. I'm making a new body, and I'm going to say OK. All right, so now in that bodies folder, now we've got a body. And I always think it's a good idea for us to name these as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and name that the bottom of my box. And I'm going to continue extruding the other parts of my box here. So if I click on the Create menu and then choose Extrude again, I'm going to extrude each of the sides of my box here, and I'm going to make those, let's say, 3 inches. That'll probably be plenty of room for our internal components. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go 2.5. Now my operation here, I'm not going to choose Join. I'm going to choose New Body. Each one of these individual bodies, or each one of these individual sides, is going to be a separate part that we glue together. So we'll need to know the sizes of these individual components before we assemble our box. So I'm going to keep these as a new body, and I'm going to say OK. Now we got 2 more bodies to name. So I'm going to call this one my right side, and I'm going to call this one my left side. And we want to extrude 2 more things here. So come up to my extrude tool one more time. I'm going to choose the front and back faces of my box here. Now, instead of specifying a size here, I can just click on this face here, and it will automatically jump up to that size. Let me do that again, just in case you guys missed it. So, you can specify a dimension here. The other thing you can do here is you can change the distance to an object. And then I can pick this face here, and it will extrude right up to that object. And I'm going to choose, instead of Join, I'm going to choose New Body. And I'm going to say OK. I've got 2 bodies to name, so I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. We've got a back, and we've got a front. Now, just as a point of illustration, the reason that I chose to extrude that very last extrude differently is because now if I want to change the height of my box, I only have to change one extrusion. So if I right-click this feature here and say Edit Feature, this is where I was making the extrusion for these side walls. And if I make this, say, 4 inches now, you can see the other walls automatically extrude that same amount, because they're always going to extrude to this face here. So it's a way to not really constrain, but I guess give some rules to your sketch or to your drawing here that kind of make it easier to make adjustments later. So that feature that we chose there, that option that we chose there, is to extrude to an object instead of extruding a distance. So that can be handy sometimes. All right, so now let's make ourselves a top. I'm kind of choosing to draw this top separately from the other sketch. I guess I could have drawn the top along with the same box sketch here, but I'm choosing to make it separate. Just a personal decision, I guess. All right, so the top of my box is going to be right at this top surface. So if I create a new sketch, so I'll come up here to Create, and then choose Create Sketch. And now I click on the top of my box here. Something I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to take some geometry that I've already have existing, and I'm going to want to project it onto this plane. So it'd be nice to have these corner points to select. So when I choose the drawing menu, I can easily snap to these corner points here because I chose to make my drawing on this face. But I can't really snap to the corner points over here. And I definitely want to make it the same size. Now, we know the dimensions, so we could just add those dimensions in, I guess. But we're going to go ahead and project our geometry from the sketch below. So if I come up here to this Create menu, and then come down to Project Include, and then over to Project. Now I can take this line here and this line here and project them, and I'll have the 2 corner points that I need. The other option would be, instead of choosing to project specified entities in my project window here, I could choose to specify a body, and then I could just either highlight my bottom or, hover over the bottom in my drawing view here, and it'll go ahead and project all those lines here. Those purple lines are my projected lines. I can turn off my bodies, and you can see I've got those purple projected lines. All right, now let's make the top of our box. So if I grab my 2-point rectangle tool, and I just make a simple rectangle here that divides our box roughly in half, I think that'll be good. And I'm going to say Finish Sketch. All right, so I like to keep up with the naming of things, so we made a new sketch. Let's go ahead and give it a name. This is our box top. And we can extrude each of the parts of this box. So if I grab my extrude tool and I choose the front of this box and we extrude it a width of 1/4 of an inch here. Again, we want to make sure we're choosing new body every time we do these extrudes, because every time you have bodies that are touching each other, when you do an extrusion, it kind of defaults to making a join. And we want to make a new body here for our box. So I got new body selected, and I'll click OK. This is our top front. And then the last item that we are going to extrude here is our top back. So that's these other two items in our box here. And we're going to extrude them that same 1/4 of an inch. And we're going to choose to make it a new body. And I'm going to say oakley dokley. All right. So let me do a little check-in here. How you guys doing at home? You guys following me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Following me here?
No. Once you started getting fancy with extruding the sides, you left me in the dust.
Okay, cool.
And I did get caught up, but by then you were already about 5 steps ahead.
No worries.
What I did was I just created a 2 3/4 inch offset plane, and I'm starting my sketch there to make the lid.
Cool. Yeah. So you got your lid you're drawing, and it'll look kind of like that is the sketch you're going to make for your lid. So we just kind of drew a rectangle that went to the halfway point. So should I go back to that point, Mark, for you? Just want to do a little bit of catch up here, so I'm just going to go back to this sketch that we were making. And in order to get the geometry from down below, we used our project command here. So we went down to project include, and then we chose this project option. And what this project option lets us do here is to highlight different bodies and to project those lines onto our drawing surface here. Does that make sense?
Okay, let me delete some shit here.
Okay, cool.
Back up. Okay.
And here, I'll do the same. Here, let me highlight this and delete here.
Okay.
So here, I gotta...
First, the body of the box is done. Now, catch me up with how you do your project.
So in this create menu here...
you started with another sketch?
Yeah, I made a new sketch.
Okay, a new sketch.
Yep.
On which plane?
And I made that on this plane right back here. However, any of these planes would be sufficient. Any of the planes that make up kind of the top edge or the top face of this box, any of those would be fine. And then on that sketch, that's when I use that project command. So if we click on create and then come down to project include and then over to project.
Yes.
Now in our project window, the selection filter is probably set to specified entities, which is the little purple icon there.
Yep.
We're going to choose projecting a body. So a specified entity will allow us to project like individual lines or individual points, or like whole faces. The bodies selection will let us choose whole bodies. So it's kind of like, in this case, picking the whole face, but if we move our mouse over the middle, you can see the red lines that appear on the outside of my selection here. And if I click, then it kind of makes a projected all...
If you click inside the box, it creates the perimeter of the box.
Exactly.
Okay, but what? I just clicked. The base of the box is changed color. The left has changed color. The 3 other are constrained to the height of the left wall. If you can teach me, you can teach anyone, Carl. I'm a challenge. See, this one right here, this one I set the height at 2.5. These three, when I extruded, I set them to the height of this one. So this is like our master wall right here. And as far as geometry select, I put it in the middle and click. I can cancel that. And see, I put that in here, and see the red line is on the outside, like you said. But when I click, that's blue, gray, gray, and gray.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's doing that, but I would just say okay.
Okay?
Yeah, it looks like you're good. It looks like you got points.
I
there
have
in
4
the right
points.
spot. So when Mike was doing his extrusion here, so you can see or not his extrusion, his projection. You can see on my screen when I choose to select this body here that is the bottom, it all turns blue. It all highlights blue. Mike's was not highlighting all blue. Parts of his sketch was gray. I don't know why, but when we clicked OK, we got all these projected lines. And I can turn off my bodies here, and you can see that we've got these 4 projected lines that make up our rectangle. And now, you know, I drew a rectangle again, Mike, but we can just...
4 points.
But instead of that, we can... It was kind of some extra steps. All we really need to do is draw a line. We just need to draw a line from our midpoint on one side of our box to the midpoint on the other side of our box.
You eyeball the midpoint?
Well, the midpoint will automatically snap to. So if I hover over my line with my line...
Constraint first, or did you just draw a line?
Yeah, I didn't add a constraint. Of course, you could add a midpoint constraint later, I guess. So if I just have my line tool and I hover over this line, you can see I get the little blue triangle that appears, and I kind of snap to that midpoint. It kind of pops right in place. Now, something that Mike suggested is we could draw in a line here, and I could purposefully make it totally wrong. So this line is completely not in the right spot, although from a fabrication or a design standpoint, it could be interesting to have an angled line here as the top of your box. But that's kind of a side discussion. So what we can do to make this line snap into place is use a constraint like our midpoint constraint. So if I come up here to constraints and then midpoint, I'm pretty sure that I have to select sketch objects to change constraint. So if I choose that point and then I choose that line, there we go. In general, the thing you click on first when you're in Fusion, if you have to click on 2 things, and one of those things you want to move, to do the moving, I click on the thing I want to do the moving first. So I'm going to click on this point because I want it to do the moving. I want to move that point to the midpoint of this line. And once I do that, I get this blue or this triangle that pops up. This is my midpoint constraint. And all my lines are black. So, cool? Cool. All right, so now we can say finish sketch. And now we just have to extrude the 2 parts of our sketch here. So we'll click on create and extrude to extrude the front part of our box. And I've just extruded it up a distance of 1/4 of an inch. And then see, it's giving me a little warning here. up 1/4 of an inch there. And then the next extrude, it's interesting. So you can see in my timeline, because I've kind of gone back in time and changed my sketch. Originally, I had drawn a rectangle, and I changed my sketch enough that Fusion doesn't know what this extrude came from. It's still drawing it, but it's giving me a little yellow warning. You don't need to worry too much about yellow warnings, but here it says missing profiles. So when I right-click to edit it, I can, select the right profiles. And we're making a new body here. I always appreciate the questions. So, I'm glad that you stop me and say, hey, go back a little bit, because I'm sure that other people have had those occasions. And I'm always happy to go back and if you missed a couple of steps, to help you get up to speed. It's the advantage of tuning into class live as opposed to watching the recording, is you can poke your head in with questions and be like, hey, what about this? Or how come you didn't do it like that? So join us live. It's great. All right, so now that we've got our box, the thing that I want to do to this box is to make it, right? So before I make it, I think last week we talked a little bit about materials, and I think we're going to have time to do that this week as well. So last week when we made our servo, we kind of colored it and made our servo look like how our servo looks in person. I'd like us to do that to our box here too, and to kind of make it look like it does in person. So if I click on this modify menu, we can come down to appearance. So if I choose this appearance option, now I've got my appearance window, and I'm just going to kind of make this a little bit bigger so it's easy for everybody to see all the options here. So this appearance window is where you'll add materials to your object to make it look a certain way. So there's a lot of materials that you can add here in Fusion. So if I come down here to the wood and the solid wood here, and then I choose finished, for example. Here I've got some mahogany. Maybe you want to make your box out of a nice piece of mahogany. Anything that's got a little arrow next to it, you have to download. So this ash, for example, ash is one of my personal favorite woods. Got a real nice grain. And in fact, let's make mine a semi-gloss ash. So if I download that little semi-gloss ash, the way that you apply these materials to our various bodies out here is either by clicking and dragging on top of the body in the drawing view, or I can click and drag on the body in my bodies folder. Now, the other option here is I want to color all these bodies the same material. So something I can do is I can click on this first body in my browser in my bodies folder, and then I can hold down the shift key and I can click on the last body in that list, and that's going to highlight all the bodies here. In fact, if maybe I just wanted to apply this to a couple of bodies, oh, hey, look at that. I got rid of my appearance window all together here. So I could just highlight a couple of these bodies, and maybe like that one, and highlight all the bodies I want to make a specific material, and then I can drag this semi-gloss ash on top of those bodies, and it would just make those selected bodies that material. But again, I want to make all these bodies that semi-gloss ash. All right, so now I'm going to click close because I've got my materials applied here. There's lots of cool materials to explore, and I would encourage you to do so. So in previous classes, we've always enjoyed thinking that we're going to make something out of solid gold, especially things that you have to machine. So anytime we have a CNC project, we always get our gold out, and then you can make the lid of this box out of a nice polished gold. It's more effective if you get a really big block of gold, and then you just surface mill the top of it, down to just 1/4 of an inch thick, and that's how you know you're really machining stuff at the Makerspace. All right, I'm going to leave that gold because it's kind of fun. Actually, maybe let's make the front gold, and let's make the back wood. All right. So now I'm going to say close. Now, let's go ahead and add our servo into our... Oh my gosh, my battery's going to die. That would be really bad if my battery died on my laptop right in the middle of class. All right. I got the warning. All right, crisis averted. Okay. So now we've got our box made here. Now let's see if we can add our servo to the inside of this. So I'm going to go ahead and, let's go ahead and save this document, huh? Now that we drew a thing, I'm going to go ahead and click on the save icon. This is going to be my useless box. And I've already got something called useless box, so I'm going to have to call this from class. And I'm going to go ahead and say save. Now, let's find our servo from last week. Here is our servo that we drew last week in class, over here in our file menu here, let's call that. And if I can choose to add this servo into our current document. So this useless box prod, right now I've got my box component as my active component. I want to add my servo not to the box component, but I want to add it to my main document component here. So I'm going to click on the little radio button next to my main document component. And then I can right click on my servo and say insert into current design. Once you choose that insert into current design option, we get a little move placement option here. Now you can see it's really easy to move it outside of the box. It's difficult to see it when it's inside the box here, but we can kind of get it close-ish to where it's going to need to be, somewhere in there-ish. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK, because really what we're going to need to do is to open up our little box component here and find the left side and kind of just turn the left side of our box off. And then we can see and move our servo in place better. Actually, I didn't do a bad job of getting it moved into place, but if I grab my move tool one more time, just by hitting the M key, or by clicking on modify, and then move. Now the type of object that we want to move here is not a body. We actually want to move a component, because we've got this servo component that we just added here. And I can either highlight the servo component over here in my browser, and that's usually how I choose to do this. And then I can move it in place a little bit better. Again, I did a pretty decent job. We're going to be moving this later as we kind of finalize and make more drawings in this next week, add our arm and stuff like that. But for now, somewhere inside of there is good enough. And I'm going to say OK. Now I'll turn on the left side of my box again, so it's a nice fully enclosed item. And then the last thing that we want to do here before I show you guys how to generate a drawing is, let's see if we can, do we want to do that? We got time. We're going to make it. All right, so I'm going to click on Insert, because we need to make a switch. The top of our box needs a switch. Last week we drew a servo. I'm going to suggest that maybe some things you don't need to draw yourself. McMaster Car is a wonderful place. I order from them at work all the time, and they're super useful. We have a location right here in Milwaukee, so sometimes you can get things next day, which is fantastic. So if we choose this insert option, and again, something I want to point out is I have my main document component as my active component, because I'm going to insert a component from McMaster Car, and I don't want to insert it into the servo component or into the box component. I want to put it in my main document component here. So I've got that main document component active, as you can see by that radio button. And now when I click on Insert McMaster Car component, now we get this is basically the McMaster Car website. If you've ever been to the McMaster Car website, it looks like this. And it's got a nice little search bar up here, so we can type in switch, toggle switch. That's what we want right here. So if you start typing in switches, and then you get these toggle switches right here, which is exactly the kind of switch we're looking for. Specifically, just a plain toggle switch. McMaster Car has lots of probably crazy switches that you can get. Switches that are waterproof or mil-spec wash-down toggle switches. I don't know what that is, but it sounds expensive. I'm just going to choose this regular toggle switch right here. And even more specific here, the type of switch. I'm going to make mine a flat switch because I think it'll be easier to hit with the little arm that comes out of the thing. So if I hit this, push this flat toggle switch there. Now we get down to where we just have one product available. So it's a $22 switch, unfortunately, which is a little expensive for a switch. But it's already drawn for us, which is great. So I just have to choose a color. I'm going to pick a green switch. And now I can just click on this product detail if I want to see like more information about this product and like drawings and pictures and all sorts of stuff. Or I can choose here this drop-down menu that says SolidWorks. And I can scroll to this option that says 3D Step. So there's a 3D Step option. And then I can say Download. So now this is very similar to what we just did, right? We just added our servo component, and we got a move copy box like this, and we got a little component that popped up over here. We can move this for, I don't know, I guess you could say for free without having to add the move command. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of get it in place. It's going to be like somewhere in here-ish as far as height goes. And then I'm going to move it over so it's like nearish the middle of my box. And again, we'll be fine-tuning these positions next week when we make the actual arm. And that looks like it's in a decent position, and I'm going to say okay. Cool. So now the last thing that we want to do before we generate our drawing is we want to make the hole for our switch in for me, my piece of gold. And I'm just going to do that by making another drawing on the top of my box here. So I'm going to make a new sketch on this surface. That is the circle. That is a circle that will represent the hole for our switch to pop up here. So if I come here to the Create Sketch icon, and I hover over this position here, you know what, actually, I'm changing my mind. I'm not going to make that hole right now, because until we have our arm drawn, we don't know exactly where that switch is going to live. So when we draw our arm next week, then we'll kind of more precisely place this switch so our arm can reach it, and then we'll make our hole. So we'll do that next week. But right now, in the last 10 minutes here, I kind of want to show you the last thing that I was talking about here in this class here is making drawings. So if we want to make this physically, if we want to go into the wood shop and make this physically, it's a pain in the butt to bring your computer in there and have all these measurements. It's also like, why should I take notes and write stuff down physically when I can have Fusion generate me some real nice drawings? And we generate a drawing that we can print out and take into the wood shop by clicking on File and then choosing New Drawing from Design. So we previously we've been working with sketches. Sometimes I call sketches drawings, and I should not do that because it can get confusing. A drawing is a specific thing. If you've ever gotten checked out by Tom in the machine shop or been like, hey Tom, I'd like to make X part. The first question he's going to have is, where's my drawing? He's like, where's your drawing? And he's always going to say that. So here's where we make our drawings. And I've actually shown Tom drawings from Fusion here. So I'm going to specify a sheet size here in my Create Drawing window. That'll be a size that I can print, so namely 8.5 by 11. So I'm just specifying a sheet size here. Some of this other stuff we don't really have to worry about a whole lot for making stuff for ourselves in shop. I'm sure that there are drawing standards that if you're going to give something to a machine shop, you're going to want to give them to them in a specific drawing standard, in units that make sense for the country that you're sending this to. For us here, we're going to keep it in freedom units, and I'm going to say OK. Now, it's going to do its magic and pop us over to this drawing window here. And here we got like a sheet of paper sitting in front of us. And I've got an icon that represents our model here that I can place. And for example, I can take my drawing view and I can say, hey, don't make a front drawing. Make a isometric northeast. And I could place this drawing right there. And I could change its size, make it a little bit bigger. So I'll give it a scale of 1 to 2. Now, I will say I used to work for somebody who hated seeing scales like this. 1 to 2 doesn't mean anything to some people. So, and if you're an architect, you want to see like inches. You know, maybe like a machine shop will see, 2 to 1 or 8 to 1. Tom, you can chime in here if you got opinions on this. But like I know when we sent stuff to an architect, they want to see inches. They want to see 1/4 equals 1 inch. And because I think what they want to do is they want to take out their ruler and they want to put it on the sketch and be able to measure something on the sketch. Yeah, and Tom is nodding his head. So,
Yes.
and so maybe this is just to be on the safe side. Stay away from these 1 to 2, 2 to 1. Just go to these inches, and then people won't be upset with you. So if I choose this, oh, that's way small. That's 1/2 inch equals a foot. I always want to choose like 1/2 inch equals, oh boy. And I think I could just type in measurements here too. So I can say 1/2 inch equals 1/2 inch equals 1 inch. So it's basically a 2-to-1 drawing here, but it'll specify this down in the bottom. And if I've got that placed where I want to, I can say OK. Now it's going to draw me a little shape here. If I wanted to, I can double click on that and I bring back up my drawing view window. And the reason that this might be handy is it kind of drew us a box, and we took that time to add our materials to our box here. We want people to see that we've got this solid gold top to our box. So if we change our style to this shaded style, then you can see all of our materials we added here. Now, in addition to this box that kind of tells us, or this image that shows us what our drawing is going to be of, we can also, if I click on New Base View here, I can add a drawing down here of the side of my box. And again, we'll make the scale, let's make the scale uniform, huh? So if I make this 1.5 inches equals 1 inch, then we got uniform scale here. And I'm going to say OK. Now this box, this drawing, I don't necessarily need to be all shaded in like that. But I do want to have some measurements. So I can add some dimensions from our items up here at the top. So here we got all of our drawing items that we can add. And if I choose this dimension option, I can do things like specify how long that line is. And that line is 6 inches. And I can specify how wide this box, how tall that box is there. Mm-hmm. And I can specify like this top. So another pet peeve of somebody used to work for is he wanted to see all the dimensions on the same two sides. Tom, is that pretty standard? Is that like a thing?
But basically, yeah, you try to have them all linked together. Otherwise, you start grabbing 0 points from all over the place.
Okay.
Then your dimensions don't add up.
So, like, the standard, the right way to do it would be to have all these measurements like down here and down here, right?
Yeah. Well, we've got chain dimensions, but okay, we'll go with that for now.
Okay, cool. And I can specify like the width of my box here. Maybe make that down there like that.
Well, that's fine.
Now, let's go ahead and draw the front of our box here too, because we don't know how wide this is right now. So I'm going to grab one more base view, and this is going to be, let's get the right. Yeah, that'll work. Again, let's keep our units the same, because nothing will confuse somebody else or yourself, your future self. You can always confuse your future self by having units that don't match or having a scale that doesn't match. Mm-hmm. So now the last measurement we really need on this box is just this measurement right down here. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, everything you can get from the other box. And, you know, that's it. Now we've got a drawing that we can print out and we can take into the wood shop with us, and we don't have to worry about getting accidentally putting our laptop through the planer or the jointer, or like, you know, you got your laptop on the table saw and you just accidentally cut it right in half with the piece of wood that you're cutting. Now you won't make that mistake because you'll have this piece of paper instead. So that's it. Oh, and you know what? Let's go ahead and save this, because this document actually gets saved in Fusion. So if I close that document, this document you can see opens up right over here in our window. And this document is linked to our useless box drawing here. So if I were to change something, like say if I go down here and edit this sketch, and I make my box 5 inches, and I say finish sketch, and nothing swore at me too bad, so that's good. And I save this. Now, after that saves, if I open up my useless box drawing, I've got this little tiny icon up here in the top. And it's telling me that I've got to update some things in my drawing. So if I click on this icon, then it updates, and you can see that it got wider, and now it's a 5-inch measurement there. So this drawing is kind of linked to this other drawing, so you can make changes freely and then just update your drawing and push print again and go into the wood shop and make your stuff. Cool. So that's it. Do you guys have any questions at home?
For the scale, you can also use a decimal, like 0.5, 0.25.
Oh, really? Like
2 points. It depends on where you're at and what the company standards are.
Okay, cool. But I wonder if Fusion will let me do that. So if I could say 0.5, look at that. Sure does work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 0.5 is not a option in the maybe these are user defined options up here that I just made, but it's not a standard option here in the list. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and change this back to 1 inch. Half inch equals 1 inch. Cool. All right, so we'll see you guys next week. Next week it's really gonna be joints. Joints can be confusing. We're gonna go slow. We're gonna make some joints. I made an overly complicated joint system that flips our switch, and because I think sometimes overcomplication is fun, but you could just flip this switch with just a real simple arm, just a single arm. But I've got like 5 joints. Because, I really just want to show you guys about joints. Joints are great. We did joints in the clock project in this class, but we'll do joints again. Make a mechanical moving arm that will flip our switch in what I think will be the last class of our useless box project, and then we'll move on to a new one. So we'll see you guys next week at 7.
Thank you, Carl.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Good to see you, Tom. Good to see you.